My name is Matthew Todd, and welcome to Inside the Scale Up. This is the podcast for founders and executives in tech looking to make an impact and learn from their peers within the tech business. We lift the lid on tech businesses, interviewing leaders and following their journey from startup to scale up and beyond, covering everything from developing product market fit, funding and fundraising models to value proposition structure and growth marketing. We learn from their journey so that you can understand how they really work, the failures, the successes, the lessons along the way, so that you can take their learnings and apply them within your own startup or scale up and join the ever-growing list of high-growth UK SaaS businesses. Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. Here today with Charles Brecque. As always, I'll let Charles, as with the other founders, introduce themselves, introduce their business. But I'm really excited to have you on today, and thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for having me. So I'm Charles Brecque, founder and CEO of Legislate. We were started 2 years ago in Oxford, really to make contracting and contracts easier for non-lawyers. And we're doing that by making contracts machine readable, which means that we're using technology to automate the creation of contracts, but also the sharing of the data in those contracts with the systems that you interact with, so that ultimately contracting workflows can be streamlined.
Awesome. I look forward to digging into the detail of exactly what that means, as well as obviously some of the business side of the details as well. But I guess first up is what led to you kind of founding Legislate in the first place? What was your background that enabled you to do that? I know from our previous discussion you are not a lawyer, so interesting to hear how you got started.
Yeah, so although I'm not a lawyer, I was doing business development at another startup and was effectively the middleman between our legal team and our clients' legal teams. So I was always, maybe filling in the template, sharing it, and then waiting for feedback, and then, looking at the feedback, sharing it with legal, etc. So I effectively saw a lot of contracts, dealt with a lot of contracts, learned a lot about what should or shouldn't be in a contract, but ultimately was frustrated by how long it would take a simple document, whereas an NDA or a very low value POC agreement to be processed. And one of the key reasons was because, these documents were never quite a high enough priority for legal teams, which meant that most of the time we were just waiting for them to look at the contract. And then once they looked at the contract, the feedback was generally always the same. So what I thought was, why don't we create a digital platform that me, the business user, can use to create those documents and have them reviewed without necessarily getting legal teams involved, so that they can, to a certain extent, trust the technology to delegate to, non-lawyers, business users, so that they can actually take those decisions themselves, but all within a safe and robust framework. So that was 2 years ago. And we've built that platform, and we've got thousands of users and many customers.
Awesome. Now I think it's always good when you hear the founder kind of knows and experiences that pain point. It's pretty common with people we have on the podcast that we speak to, as they were in that situation, and that was the thing that motivated them to try and get something off the ground. So how did you then go from experiencing that pain point, having the idea, seeing the opportunity, to validating it, to starting to build it?
Yeah. So first of all, I needed a bit of capital, because although I did study engineering, I'm not a developer. I knew how to dabble in code, so I created a very, very rudimentary mock-up of what the app would look like, how it would work, and the underlying technology. And then I pitched some of the angels that invested in the startup I was working at, and through that secured an initial 150,000 in angel funding, and then left my startup, but I left on good terms, which was I think very important, because they taught me everything, and I also wanted to a certain extent build my app for them so that they could also benefit from it. So I think that's just one key insight is to always leave on good terms. Don't make unnecessary enemies. And they were very supportive as well. So that was great. So with that 150, built the first version with some consultants. And then we got a couple of early customers from the local Oxford startup network. And I think that the turning point was we came across a large student landlord who didn't want to, it was bang in the middle of lockdown, so didn't want to, have too much human interaction when onboarding student tenants to their properties. And they thought Legislate would be a good fit, and it worked. And they it helped them save, tons of hours, but more importantly, it was all online. So they had all the data, they had all the audit trails that they need for their compliance purposes. And that was, the key point that we used to then raise £1 million last year from one of the venture funds that was also invested in that startup. So I pretty much just worked within my network to where I had a track record to secure that funding, and then built out the product initially with consultants. And then when we had enough funding, then we grew out the team properly with a proper team.
Yeah, I see. No, that's good to know that you had that network there. And as you say, you didn't alienate that network by trying to jump ship, as it were, but you were able to kind of do that in a way that added value to them as well.
Yeah. I think ultimately, this is a problem that startup had, and I wanted to solve for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of mentioned that, kind of later that second kind of round of funding, then in that bigger round of funding enabled you to start to build that team. What does the team look like now?
Yeah, so today we're a team of 12, and we've got a tech team of 7, and then a non-technical team of 5. So yeah.
And what are they working in office? Are they remote? Are they all in Oxford? Are they distributed? What does that kind of look like these days for that kind of tech team that was right for you?
Yeah, so I'd say as most startups, the team you start with isn't necessarily the team you end up with in the long run. And obviously we've got some people who've been here since the beginning, but what we ended up doing is keeping in Oxford our legal team, sales and marketing, but also our knowledge graph team, because ultimately the technology which underpins the platform is a knowledge graph, and that's kind of born in Oxford at the University of Oxford. So that's why it's key for us to have that team here. And we built our proper software development team in Seville in Spain. And that happened with lockdown as well. We had a great candidate apply, and we thought, why not? And when we secured that funding, then we just thought, well, why don't we build that? Because it's working with this great, tech lead. Why don't we build a team around him there? So, we've got 2 offices. Everyone goes in their respective offices. But one office is in Oxford and one office is in Seville. So it's not remote, but it's two teams in 2 locations.
Two hubs then, basically, rather than fully distributed.
Exactly.
Cool. So having kind of got it, past that proof of concept stage, started to get those first customers, how did you then start to grow that customer base early on?
Yeah. So we started with friendlies, and they were really crucial for shaping the product, providing feedback, but also understanding where do they find value in our product, because we obviously had a hypothesis around where they get value from using Legislate, but everyone is different. Everyone has their own views, opinions. So it was very useful to kind of identify ultimately where is the ROI for them. And we then kind of did a bit of outbound to try and find more similar companies. But I'd say where we were the most successful is through inbound. So in my previous role, in my business development efforts, because I was selling machine learning technology, I always wrote articles as a way of, for myself, learning more about what it is that I was selling, but also to help clients get a taster or a primer of what it is that we actually were selling before going into those conversations. So I thought for what we're doing, it's really useful because we're targeting non-lawyers who have contracts to create. So which means that they're probably not experts in contracts, or probably don't create contracts often, or if they do, then they're struggling. And so really what we did was we decided to publish a lot of content. Last year we put out 180 articles. This year we're already at 350 in total now. And just by putting out that content regularly, having almost every single team member contribute, meant that very quickly we ended up getting some organic leads, and through that our efforts have been then focused on, well, how do we get a free sign up to a paying customer, but ultimately that's where we've been the most successful, and we've now got over 70 paying customers.
Excellent. I think that's obviously the approach that we promote and recommend with people that we work with. Outbound is only going to get you so far. It's trying to find the 1% of the 1% almost that are ready to buy right now, but also have already gone through enough of the decision-making process that they are in a position to buy. But then if they've done that, they've probably been educated by someone else and already have somebody else's product in mind. So I certainly would recommend a content-based approach alongside other elements as well. So how did you find out what worked from a content perspective? Because I see a lot of people trying to put out content. They'll hear people recommending, I need to do content, and then they'll probably pay a copywriter to write a bland piece of copy that is pretty generic and isn't very value adding at all. So how did you approach that? Or how do you approach that?
So we don't use copywriters, and not that I have anything against copywriters, but I feel like as a startup we don't have that much money, objectively speaking, and second of all, it's much faster for us internally to produce and publish an article than wait a week for a copywriter to produce a piece of content. So it was all about speed as opposed to strategy. So I think we definitely winged it by just thinking what are the problems that our customers have, and what problems might they be, what queries might they be searching for to solve those problems. So it was more just making sure that we had enough content on our blog to kind of address the various questions of the key topics. And for us, a topic would either be a contract type that we offer, or questions around that contract, or if you think of the day in the life of your target persona customer, what are the things that they might do? So if it's a small business, they might do some accounting or whatever. And so how can we try to attract those customers? So I'd say for the first 6 months, it was definitely very just making sure there was velocity and publishing around those topics. And I think, by using tools like Google Search Console, you can also see what queries your customer or people are using to find you. So that also led to a lot of new topics that we hadn't thought of, and was a great way to just put out content. But I'd say in terms of content, the other key thing to remember is that there's just because someone is searching for an employment contract doesn't mean they want to create an employment contract. And what's really important is to make sure that you have content which resonates with different levels of intent. Because if you only have, research type content, so content that a customer will be searching as they're doing research, then at the end of the day, the chance of them becoming a customer are very slim because they're not ready to buy yet. So I think what's really key is to make sure that you have a right balance between, content that will educate and content which is maybe a bit more transactional around, okay, you want to create that employment contract, this is how you do it. And as long as you've kind of got both, then I think you can really start to see an ROI, because both feed into each other. And yeah, I rambled a bit, so sorry.
No, that makes sense. I think you definitely do need to be putting out content and getting your opinion across at different stages in that kind of buyer's journey and decision-making process. I think too many people try and jump in at the last second, probably because they're kind of told by all these kind of ad tech tools that, you get someone to you got to get a particular click-through rate to get someone to a landing page, then you've got to get a particular conversion rate, and then your problems are solved. But it's all focused on the latter part of the journey. But I think you definitely do need that balance across throughout that buyer's journey, throughout that decision-making process, as you say. So you're not just picking somebody up at one point in that process. You do kind of stay with them throughout that process to build that trust. So when they are ready to buy, they will already be knowing where they're going to go.
Yeah, exactly.
So in terms of the next steps, then, you've got content bringing people to you. You mentioned kind of the free entry point. What does that kind of customer journey look like from that point then to become a paying customer?
Yeah, so I mean, it's free to register an account, but if you want to create contracts, then you need to pay. And we allow everyone to kind of see a demo contract. We allow everyone to start setting the terms of their contract, but it's only if and when they want to view the contract or electronically sign that they actually need to pay. So I'd say, in terms of the user journey, we try to make it as easy as possible so that people do actually, once they've registered, create a contract. And I think that's also where, if you have content, if you haven't been too thoughtful with your content, you might end up getting leads which are effectively just people signing up because they want to see what your app does, but they're not actually interested in purchasing. Yeah. So we do get users who sign up and don't actually create a contract. So really what we want to do is we want to make sure that A, we're attracting people who want to create contracts, and B, we make it as easy as possible for them to set the terms of their contract so that they can be in a position to, pay to unlock it and sign.
Yeah, no, I see. I think that's a very smart strategy, and I think people can get too caught up in these kind of false metrics of number of leads or cost per lead or whatever it might be. But the fact is that a lot of marketers will tell you that a lead is basically anyone willing to swap their email address for content or their email address for a demo. But you're quite right that many of those people probably would not be in a position to buy. They would not be a good fit. So yeah, it is good that you've been able to kind of identify the importance of quality rather than just kind of gaming the numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
And is that something that your investors and other team members needed convincing of, or are they kind of pretty smart enough to recognize the quality of customer is important?
No, I think they recognize that, because ultimately if there is no quality, then you have no customers. Yeah. So I think there's that. But I think, the other thing that we've been working on is making sure that we properly nurture leads once they've signed up, because I think, there's also customers who generally want to become customers, but they have their own jobs, they've got their own lives, so they need to do things, and so it might be that they need a nudge to come back to the app, either the next day or in the evening, etc. So I think just because someone has saved their terms for their contract and they're really, really qualified, you still need to set them up for success, because otherwise then you don't end up getting customers as well, or you end up losing customers because they might forget, or they might they find a better solution which is easier.
No, that makes sense. I think you do certainly need to stay on top of that and not make assumptions about, bothering people or anything else at that stage. I think a lot of people can be too hesitant to kind of nudge people back into engagement. And I think, certainly the first 30 days or even the first, up to 60 potentially days are critical in terms of making sure people are engaged with your platform in order to then, get them to convert to a paying customer, but also then to ensure that they get the value from the platform beyond that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned obviously the content-based approach as well. I know when we talked before, you mentioned some plans through partnerships. I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about what those kind of partnership plans might look like.
Yeah, so I think content is great. It's somewhat predictable, and once you've done the work, it doesn't cost you any more work, if that makes sense. And if your domain reputation and everything goes well, then the search engines reward you with more traffic. And in our case, traffic has been compounding organically quite steadily every month, and that leads to more signups, it leads to more customers. But I think there's only so much that content can do at a certain pace and for a certain amount of budget, if that makes sense. So what we've been doing is we've been looking at ways to really scale our customer base. And obviously we still do outbound because outbound is also very useful for maybe getting a lot more feedback from your customers. Even if they're not interested, at least you might understand what it is that they're thinking about. Because one thing about inbound customers is, yes, they're more likely to become a customer, but they're also less likely to share feedback. So I think it's important to do some outbound so that you do have that, at least some communication and etc. But I think where we're scaling is really through partnerships with companies that also service our target market. So, but obviously for tangential services, and yeah, we've just partnered with one of the UK's largest company formation groups to help entrepreneurs that are incorporating their business, help them start off with some a great suite of lawyer-approved contracts cost effectively, and that should hopefully really help us get to the other level. But we're also thinking of partnerships to really offer a complete user experience to our customers. So if you're a landlord or a small business or whatever, you might need insurance. There are various other services that are connected to your contract, and by being able to write policies, we hope to offer a more complete experience, and in turn also increase customer stickiness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see, offering a more complete solution to particular kind of segments and types of customers.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. No, excellent. I think partnerships are definitely something to explore once you've got that product market fit. But I would say also you need to have that go-to-market fit that you've got as well with the content-based approach. So then you do have something more tangible to go to those potential partners with. But I think you also do get to be a bit more strategic about the partners that you take on, how you manage those partners, rather than just, we're early stages, would you be interested in reselling this for us? And everyone has a great conversation. They probably want leads from you and vice versa. And then, no one actually gets any leads, but you have a lot of conversations.
Yeah, no, I think, we definitely, we only approached partnerships in the past couple of months, after a good year and a half of building a product and going to market. And you're right. I think if you don't have a solid business model or app or customer stream, then partners won't be interested. And I think the type of partnership that you can do before, though, is more content type partnerships where I post on your blog, you post on mine, and it then helps your content strategy even more, and it makes everyone seem a little bit bigger than they really are, and it also creates brand awareness with the right target groups as well. If you do a guest post with on a a tangential solution or whatever, or a potential future partner, then it also helps create some awareness before you do reach that stage where you can properly partner.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very smart. I think, looking for content partnerships early on, and then, those fulfillment or white label partners once you've got past that stage of product and go to market fit is definitely a very good approach to help with growth. So you kind of mentioned at the beginning the looking to make contracts machine readable as well as human readable, so you can do other things with that data. I'd love to know kind of more about what that looks like in practice and what that could evolve into.
Yeah, so I think the key thing is that a contract which is not machine readable typically is only lawyer readable, which means that if you're not a lawyer, it can be challenging to really understand if your contract is a good contract, if it has everything you need, or more importantly, what might be if there are things missing from a contract. If you're not a lawyer, it's really difficult to answer those questions. The other issue is that it's also difficult post-signature to track what's in your contract, but it's also difficult to answer questions post-signature about, how many of my employees are on a 30-day notice period, or how many of them are on a probation period ending in 2 weeks, how many report to a certain line manager. These are all questions which are really difficult to answer because contracts are not machine readable. So we make contracts machine readable using knowledge graph technology, which is we've had 2 patents granted and a third one pending for this whole approach. And knowledge graphs are a branch of AI that Google uses to structure the web, so to establish connections and allow a relevant and efficient navigation of the web. And so we've taken that same approach for modeling contracts and documents, which means that you can query your contracts, you can get those insights very quickly, all using digitally, and without having to actually read the contract, or without actually having to ask a lawyer to answer those questions. So that, I guess, was a very technical introduction, but from a user's perspective, they don't know that necessarily that they're interacting with a knowledge graph. All they know is that they're creating a contract by answering questions in a formed question and answer type style in a very simple form, where questions are all interlinked. And if for example you select something, then questions which are not relevant disappear. And we've got a lot of flexibility thanks to the knowledge graph, which means that really compared to other document builders, so we have a document builder, that's kind of how you create a contract, but we have a lot more flexibility thanks to the knowledge graph. And then after the document's generated, everything is tracked in the knowledge graph. So I'd say it's really giving control to our users of the data that's in their contracts. And yeah.
No, I think that is a very, very different approach. I think it's a very, very powerful approach. And yeah, I can already see some, really powerful use cases, yes, for kind of reporting on that data, but also, integrating with that data as well. I can imagine like an onboarding process for a new employee. As you say, you've got their kind of holiday terms, you've got their, the salary and everything else in the contract. So why not push it out from that contract into all of the other systems and places that it needs to be?
Yeah, that's really the plan. We're going one step at a time. We focus first on making the data usable to our users, and we definitely in the longer term to make that data exchangeable with those services, so that you don't have to manually re-enter that information across the systems that you use.
No, I think that's very powerful. I think there's a lot of potential there. And one thing you mentioned there was IP protection. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so I think as a startup, it's really important to protect your IP, because ultimately, 99% of the value of your business is your IP, or at least from the investor's perspective. And so IP needs to be protected, but what that means in practice is you need to have a moat around your IP to prevent competitors from using it or appropriating it. So obviously you can protect your IP on a case-by-case basis with contracts and NDAs, but that doesn't scale beyond businesses or people or consultants that you are interacting with. So we took the decision to file patents to protect our approach, give us a bit more protection. And we did that by filing in the US, because the US is typically the first market you file in, because you can accelerate the application process, which you can't do in other jurisdictions. And that's how we were able to get our patents granted quickly. And then afterwards, what you do is you then convert your patents across into patents of other jurisdictions via international patent treaties. And then it goes through maybe more of the typical process in each of those jurisdictions. So, but at least there's a precedent of a patent in a jurisdiction, which for our case also happens to be our, the biggest market in terms of size. We're not in the US yet, but at least we've got coverage there. So yeah, we've got 2 patents, a third one pending, and I'd say the plan is definitely to build a portfolio of patents so that we have, I'd say, maximum coverage of our protection, and then that's what we're doing. But I say, ultimately, what's even better than patents is just execution and just growing quickly and getting lots of users and lots of customers in all these jurisdictions. Because the sooner we do that, the sooner we'll just have market dominance.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I think it's definitely good to have as much protection as you can, but you need that growth alongside that. Otherwise, you don't have a business. So you said that kind of US first approach, makes a lot of sense because it's the biggest market and route to kind of expanding that protection. For other kind of founders of tech companies, platforms, how long does that kind of process take? How much does it cost? How difficult is it to try and go through that kind of process, from a UK seeking to get protection in the US?
Yeah, so I think it definitely isn't as complicated as people think. I mean, it really also depends on if you're a hardware or a software business. One of the patentability requirements is that it can't be done in your head. And the problem with software is if you write the steps down, then an examiner can always argue that it can be done in your head. So I'd say it's really important to, I'd say it's more of there's a bit of a methodology to follow when it comes to writing software patents. Whereas for hardware, you can actually, I wouldn't say it's easy to get a patent, but the issue with it being with the, is it something you can do in the head is less likely to be an issue. So I think those are the 2 things. And then depending on in which bucket you fall in, you can either choose to prepare the application yourself, which I think is always important, but the application needs to be prepared within a certain style, and so all of that is free. If you can do all of that for free, you can also write your own claims, and you can file. So then you just need to pay the filing fees, which are a couple of $100, and then if you want to accelerate the process, then it's a couple of $100 extra. But where you probably do want to work with a patent attorney is around the claims, because there is an art to how you design your claims, so that if ever an examiner kind of pushes back, then you end up with a fallback option, which is still something that you wanted, as opposed to not ending up with a fallback and having nothing. So there's an art to how the claims are designed, and that's where you probably do want to seek expertise. But there is also, an art to the actual application. So in our case, I wrote the applications, but still worked with an examiner attorney, to shape the application. And I don't know if it helped, because I haven't done an application without an attorney, but I think it is quite it can be quite complicated to really understand how everything works. And I think if you have budget, then I would definitely recommend to work with an attorney.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think there are a lot of startups, scale-ups that probably don't have the right contracts in place to start with, and obviously a platform like yours can certainly help with that. But I think also they don't often have the right level of other types of IP protection in place, even just with the more limited set that you can do in the UK, but certainly further afield as well. A lot of companies will have that ambition of going to the States. It's a very, very big market for a lot of companies, obviously. So I think, getting that protection early on does make a lot of sense. Otherwise, your growth plans might be kind of held back before they've even started.
Exactly.
So what's next for Legislate then? I know you talked about some of the more data related items, but how do you see kind of Legislate growing over the next couple of years?
Yeah, so in our case, we've built a product. We've got customers, users. We're obviously adding more contract types to the platform so that we really can ensure that our customers can create anything that they need to create on Legislate. But I'd say our next phase of growth will be coming from APIs. So we're building a public API version of our platform so that other software platforms can integrate Legislate into their workflows to offer offer contracting in their apps. And so I'd say we've had quite a lot of interest from some property related platforms. We're kind of exploring how that looks like in practice, and I think that will lead to some very interesting use cases and insights. But we're also looking at employment and effectively, trying to kind of work out which platforms we can grow with. And I'm sure that once we've actually integrated, then we'll end up with a lot more users, a lot more customers, and then it'll be interesting to see, what problems emerge from that or opportunities emerge from that.
Yeah, fantastic. No, that sounds like you've got a lot of kind of clarity on that vision, a lot of plans for growth based on that as well. So I think, it sounds like you've done a great job kind of launching Legislate at a potentially tricky time, and I wish you all the best in growing it over the next few kind of months and years. So before we go, is there anything else, any other kind of bits of advice that you'd give to kind of fellow startup scale-up founders?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key piece of advice is, legal might seem like an unnecessary expense. And, I'd say in most cases, legal bills are way too expensive for what you are. And I think especially if you are a startup founder, you pretty much only get one shot at making it right. So, if you have limited funding, it might seem like a massive gamble to spend a couple of £1,000 on a set of documents. And I agree, it's a huge expense, and it isn't actually going to move your business forward. All it will do is protect your business in case something goes wrong, and things do go wrong. And I'd say if you kind of appreciate that things can go wrong and that you do need good contracts that are lawyer approved, then I definitely suggest checking out Legislate, because we offer all the lawyer approved contracts. We get our library templates from the same libraries as law firms, and our legal teams go through them and really, I'd say, adapt them so that they're written in plain English, but also adapt them so that you can get the flexibility that you want. So, if, for example, you're hiring a software developer, there's a question, and we'll, if you select it, add some extra clauses which are relevant to software developers. And then post-signature, you have all your contracts in one place, which, it might seem like an overkill if you have a team of 5, but, you will still generate contracts. And then if and when you do reach a point where you need to raise funding and go through a due diligence process, then you've effectively automated, hours and hours or even days of work by using Legislate. So I'd say it kind of is, the tool that, you should start using as early as possible in your journey, because the benefits will compound in time. And especially as you do grow, it'll make your life so much easier. You'll have the data, you'll be able to create new contracts faster, and you'll be compliant.
Cool. I think that's great advice. I'll be dropping obviously links to Legislate in the notes for this episode as well, so people can take a look, check it out, see if it's a good fit for them. But I think especially that point on due diligence is really important for a lot of startup founders, especially if they're looking to fundraise at some point. Too many, have regret at that point when they start to go through those processes, and can be painful processes. So if there are simple things that can make their lives easier, more cost effective, more time effective in the early days, that's going to compound, as you say, then I think those types of efforts are certainly worth doing. So thank you for that. I think there's a lot of interesting lessons for startup scale-ups from here, not least the importance of product market fit, content-based approaches that pick up the right kinds of customers. So thank you for taking the time today. And I look forward to catching up again soon, hearing how some of those growth plans have been able to help move things forward for you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for having me and the opportunity to give Legislate a platform for your audience.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Inside the Scale-Up. Remember, for the show notes and in-depth resources from today's guest, you can find these on the website insidethescaleup.com. You can also leave feedback on today's episode, as well as suggest guests and companies you'd like to hear from. Thank you for listening.